Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to the bunker. It's time for another voicemail. Today's voicemail is from Jacob. Let's listen to what Jacob has to say.
So I guess I'd like to start with saying thank you for doing what you do. It's definitely helped in my exit and also helped me come to terms with some of the things that have happened afterwards. I left when I was 14 years old, still living in my grandmother's house, who was very much a Jehovah's Witness still to this day, which complicated things from the age of 14 to 18 when I moved out. I decided to disassociate myself at 14 after being baptized at 11. Mostly because I never wanted to hear from these people again. The shunning part was rough at first. I never really, I guess, came to terms with it until about 2, maybe 3 years ago. And I'm 22 years old now. I guess my question would be, how do you move past the feeling that you're doing something wrong? Because that indoctrination goes so deep. I most days am fine, but I do still have those moments in time, those maybe span of a day, or maybe it's just 20 minutes, where I feel like I'm doing everything wrong. And I know that it comes from that, but I would ask you what your suggestions would be to move past that. Because I know that I'm a good person. I treat everybody around me how I would want to be treated, which I know sounds biblical and it's a bit funny, but it's true. So I just want to know, how would I move past that? Because I don't speak with any of these people anymore, but for some reason they have put this lasting, lingering feeling, um, I guess, into my brain, soul, whatever you want to call it. And I would be absolutely thrilled, by the way, if you used this in a episode on your show. It would make my week. So again, thank you for everything that you do, bringing awareness, the activism, every bit of it. I admire and wish that I had the guts to do it to the level that you do. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that lovely message, Jacob. I really appreciate you calling in, and I definitely relate to your situation. I think you've done really well to get out of the organization so early. You were not messing around, were you? Having been baptized at 11, to disassociate at 14, move out at 18, and you're still only relatively young, 22. I think there'll be lots of people listening to your message filled with admiration that you figured it out so early, almost straight out of the blocks. You figured it out and you were able to put a plan into operation so that you could extract yourself from this toxic group. So huge pat on the back for being able to grasp the situation and do something about it. As to your question, how do you get past the feeling that you may be wrong? There are 3 solutions: research, research, research. I've talked about this before in my book, How to Escape from Jehovah's Witnesses. Actually, that's the t-shirt I'm wearing today, as it happens. Yeah, that's the only cure, really, when it comes to this lingering feeling that you might be making a mistake. It's inevitable that you're going to have those feelings when you have been programmed with these ideas from such a young age. I think of it as almost like coding in a computer system or some kind of software that's embedded into you, so that the way your brain responds, you don't have full control over it. It's basically your brain acting on the coding that's been put there through your childhood. And throughout your childhood, you've been immersed in this idea that there is only one true religion, which happens to be Jehovah's Witnesses. And if you leave, terrible things are going to happen to you. In your case, it's not so much a case of, oh no, terrible things are going to happen to me. It's more, I think, a case of, what if I've made a mistake? What if I've been giving myself too much credit, or I've been giving my powers of figuring out truth and falsehood too much credit? And in this instance, I've got it wrong, and I need to give Jehovah's Witnesses a second chance. I actually think that's a very common response. That's a very common train of thought. And the only way to get past it is to do the research, because you have these almost subconscious things happening in your brain. And by the way, I'm no mental health or psychological expert. I'm not in a position to diagnose the way these things work or what's going on in your brain. But the way I understand it is that if you have your brain acting on this coding almost at a subconscious level, what you need to do is give your brain the tools it needs to immediately kind of autocorrect and say, you know what, I did make the right decision, thank you. I recognize that there is residual indoctrination that's going to flare up from time to time and may continue to flare up throughout my life. But on the question of, is this the truth or not? Is this God's one and only true religion? Well, here's a bunch of reasons why it isn't. And you only have those reasons, or you can only keep a store of those reasons in your brain if you're doing the research. And if, for example, when it comes to child abuse, you're reminding yourself of exactly what's been happening in the organization and how the organization has been letting down child abuse survivors. Or in the case of the various scandals throughout its history, the various abusive elements, shunning, domestic violence, blood transfusions. If you have like a trove of reasons that you can bring to mind whenever these, I won't necessarily call them doubts, but whenever these feelings of uncertainty strike, you'll have the tools to manage them and deal with them, and hopefully get to a point where they are not dictating things. Because ultimately, it's just about making sure you're in control. I've already said on my channel that when we first started getting earthquakes here in Croatia, it was during the pandemic. And when I experienced the first one, it was early in the morning. Your brain's not properly fired up yet. Your house is shaking. You're already aware that it's a pandemic. And even if it was just for a split second, I don't mind admitting that the coding in my brain went to, well, this is like Armageddon, bingo, isn't it? You know, pestilences, check. Earthquakes, check. Lloyd, you've made a mistake. I don't mind saying that that was the thought that went through my brain, even though it was just a split second, just long enough to register before my conscious brain kicked in and was able to say, don't be silly. Of course it's not Armageddon. Of course it's not that we're about to have the planet terraformed into this paradise where only Jehovah's Witnesses get to populate the planet, and they're going to be ruled over by Stephen Lett and Tony Morris and their pals. Of course, that's not what's happening here. So you only are able, I think, to go through that reasoning process when the reasoning is there and it's readily to hand. And that's where research comes in. And I don't know how much research you've been able to do yet. At the age of 22, I would imagine there's a temptation to think, you know what, I just know it's not the truth. I just know it's all lies, so I'm just going to live my life. And I can kind of relate to people who feel that way. I just feel as though we can't take for granted how toxic and how potent this particular brand of cult indoctrination is. And we need to give ourselves the tools to deal with these periods of uncertainty when they strike, even if they're only striking very momentarily. If it's enough to cause us some distress or some anxiety, if it's enough to impact our mental health, then I believe it's something that should be addressed. And the way to address it is through research. So I don't know whether this is helpful for you. Obviously, the usual caveats apply. I'm not in a position to advise you. I can only share my opinion since you've asked for it. And ultimately, if this is something that is making your life difficult, if it's causing you mental health issues, you should definitely look into help from a mental health professional. But that's all I have to share. Hopefully it was helpful. If you would like to leave a voicemail, the thing to do is go to speakpipe.com/Cedars, remembering to indicate clearly if you don't want me to broadcast your message on my channel. But that's all I have time for. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.